Look closely, right now. I need you to see what I'm about to show you because this isn't just a story, it's a secret. Something no one was ever meant to find. And yet, here you are, eyes wide open, staring at a truth that crawls beneath your skin and refuses to let go. You're the only one who knows this. You're the only one who's been shown what lurks in the vast, swirling nightmares of the universe. And if you turn away now, maybe you'll forget. But if you keep watching, if you dare to follow, everything you think you know about reality, about life, about suffering, will fracture. I'm about to tell you why falling into a gas giant is like being tortured by nature itself. Not just because of the crushing pressure or the unbearable heat, but because something darker, something alive in its stormy depths, is waiting, watching, consuming, transforming. This is not science fiction, not some far-off fantasy. This is raw, visceral, truth hiding in plain sight. And today, you're going to be the witness. There was a moment just before everything changed when a person vanished into thin air, in the middle of an ordinary, nondescript room. No one saw it happen except me. Or rather, only I heard it. The faint whisper that slipped out of their lips, a name no one else ever uttered. A word older than memory, colder than space. It was as if reality itself cracked open, just for a heartbeat, and let a fragment of a nightmare slip through. You might be wondering, how could something so impossible be real? How could a human vanish without a trace, without warning, in front of everyone, and no one else notice? That's exactly what I thought too. Until I realized that the world we live in, the universe we've built our lives around, is more fragile and infinitely more terrifying than we've ever dared to imagine. I'm going to take you there, to the edge of that crack in reality. And once you glimpse it, you'll never look at the stars the same way again. You remember the last time you felt truly alone? Not just the quiet loneliness that lingers in empty rooms or sleepless nights, but the kind that gnaws at your bones. A cold, suffocating void where the familiar turns alien, where your own mind becomes a stranger. That's what it feels like, to fall into a gas giant. But no one has dared to tell you why. Imagine being pulled into a swirling vortex of endless storms, where pressure isn't just physical, it's psychological, crushing your very sense of self. The air around you is thick with toxins, invisible but lethal, twisting your thoughts like a dark current in an ocean of madness. You hear voices, whispers riding the winds, fragmented echoes of memories not your own, bleeding through the chaos. And beneath all that chaos, there's a slow, relentless presence. Something ancient, something alive. We've sent probes to gas giants before, haven't we? Robots with metal hearts and eyes that never blink, diving into those hellish atmospheres to gather data. But what if they sensed something? What if the data they returned was more than temperature or chemical composition? What if it was a scream trapped in a storm? An encrypted message in a language we can't yet understand, encoded in electromagnetic pulses that mimic something horrifyingly close to consciousness? I have the proof, but it's not in numbers or graphs. It's in a fragment of a recording, the last moments of a man who fell into that storm, the way his voice fractures under pressure, the way he whispers a name that has never been spoken before in any textbook or report. It's a name that sends shivers down the spine, because it sounds like a curse, a warning, and a plea all at once. When I first heard it, I thought my mind was breaking. But then I found the footage, buried deep in classified files no one was supposed to see. It was a simple experiment, routine even, until it wasn't. The moment the probe passed a certain point, the transmission distorted. The video feed flickered, and for one terrifying second, something moved on the screen. Something alive, pulsing with an unearthly glow, like the eye of a storm staring back at the universe. That's when the person vanished. Not just physically, but from time, from space, from memory, like they never existed, except for that whisper, their final, fragmented word echoing through the static, an echo that has haunted me ever since. And here's the cruelest part. No one else heard it. No one else saw the anomaly. To everyone else, it was just another failed experiment, another data loss in the void. But you and I, we know the truth. Because the moment you hear that whisper, that impossible word, your reality tilts. It feels like the universe is holding its breath, waiting for you to break the silence. I'm not going to lie. This story doesn't have a neat ending. It doesn't wrap up with answers or heroes. What I'm about to show you is the beginning of something far bigger and infinitely more terrifying. And when the truth finally breaks free, it will change everything. Because falling into a gas giant isn't just about dying in a storm. It's about being consumed by a force older than time, a nightmare that tortures not just your body but your soul. And maybe, just maybe, that force is waiting for you, too. Now lean in close. Listen. The whisper is coming back. The screen trembled. Once more, the image bleeding into static, then sharpening into something new, but different. Not the same whisper, not the same name. It was something else. Something older, rawer, almost pleading. But before I could even register the sound, the feed cut. Dead silence, blank. A black void where answers should have been. The voice had promised a secret, but it took away the only proof we had. And that's when the doubt started to creep in. Slow, insidious, gnawing at the edges of what I thought I knew. What if that voice was never real? What if the vanishing never happened? What if the whisper was just a fragment of my own fraying mind leaking out, a hallucination bleeding into the cold, sterile glow of my monitors? I rewound the footage obsessively, frame by frame. Every glitch, every pixel shift became a riddle I had to solve. But the more I watched, the less I trusted my own eyes. The timestamp on the video shifted subtly, almost imperceptibly, as if time itself refused to cooperate. Audio glitches warped the voice into a garbled, unrecognizable murmur that made my skin crawl. And then there were the gaps, moments where the recording simply ceased, replaced by static or worse, silence so absolute it pressed on my chest like a physical weight. The name, the forbidden name, was different each time I heard it. Sometimes it was a whisper, other times a scream trapped beneath layers of distortion. I started to question if it was a name at all, or just a sound my mind was desperate to make sense of. It haunted me, even in the quiet hours, when the world outside had faded to shadows and the only company was my own breath. That's when she appeared. Her name was Claire, an expert in neurolinguistics who specialized in auditory hallucinations and memory fragmentation. She didn't know me, but she found me. Or maybe she was sent. Claire was the kind of person you'd hesitate to trust. She moved with a certainty that was both unsettling and magnetic, her eyes carrying the weight of secrets that seemed far older than her youthful face suggested. "I've seen this before," she said one night, her voice low and urgent, as if sharing forbidden knowledge. Not the gas giant or the probe, but the way your mind is reacting. The gaps in your memory. The glitches in your perception. You're not just chasing a mystery. You're tangled in one that wants to erase you. I wanted to believe her, but every answer she gave only deepened the labyrinth. She showed me recordings I didn't remember making, files buried deep in my computer, encrypted and tagged with dates that made no sense. Some contained fragments of that same whisper, but layered beneath were distorted voices, conversations that contradicted everything I thought I'd seen. Others were blank, silent for minutes at a time, like voids in my own consciousness. Sometimes, when I looked at Claire, I caught something in her expression, a flicker of something unreadable, like she was holding back a truth that terrified her more than it did me. She told me to trust my instincts, but then contradicted herself in the same breath, weaving between reassurance and cryptic warnings. Was she helping me uncover the truth behind what no one tells you? Or was she part of the silence I was desperate to break? My nights blurred into restless days filled with fractured memories. I'd wake up unsure if the whisper was real, or a symptom of something darker festering inside my head. The more I dug, the less certain I became of who I was before this began. My own reflection felt like a stranger's, the face staring back worn and hollow. Every question birthed more questions. every clue dissolved into shadows. The vanishing, the voice, the gas giant, they all felt like pieces of a puzzle I was never meant to solve. Like the universe itself was a maze designed to trap the curious, a real unsolved mystery wrapped in layers of deception. And beneath it, all the feeling grew, that something was watching, waiting, breathing just beyond the edge of my perception, lurking in the static and silence, in the spaces between my thoughts where fear took root and spread like wildfire. What they don't want you to remember isn't just buried in distant storms or lost recordings. It's inside us, tangled in the fragile threads of memory and truth. And the deeper you look, the more you risk losing yourself to the void. I don't know if I'm falling into madness or something far worse, but I do know this. The whisper is back, louder now, and it's calling my name. The moment felt like salvation, a rare crack of sunlight through a sky perpetually heavy with storm clouds. After weeks, maybe months of chasing shadows, my fingers finally brushed the edge of something solid, a hidden truth tucked deep within a tangle of scrambled signals and forgotten voices. It was there, buried in the data, disguised beneath layers of noise, as if it had been waiting patiently for me to find it, for me to believe I had the answer. The whisper, the vanishing, the fractured recordings, they all lined up like stars in a constellation suddenly forming meaning. For a moment, the mystery was uncovered. I wasn't losing my grip. I wasn't crazy. They lied to me, to all of us. There was a pattern, a method behind the madness. I replayed the footage again, slower this time, eyes scanning every flicker of distortion, every fragment of sound. The voice wasn't random. It wasn't a trick of my unraveling mind. It was a warning. A message embedded in the chaotic storm of electromagnetic waves emanating from the probe's last moments. The name I'd heard whispered, haunting me like a ghost, was linked to something deeper, older than the probe or even the gas giant itself. An event. A moment of trauma buried so far back in time it had almost dissolved into myth. But it was real, raw, and waiting to be unearthed. Then, as if the universe had suddenly pulled back the veil, a memory surfaced, sharp and jagged, like a glitch in the matrix of my own mind. A woman's scream echoing down a long-forgotten hallway, a child's terrified whisper that sounded eerily like the forbidden name. A room bathed in flickering light, the walls closing in as shadows twisted and folded around something terrible. I was there, or I had been. The details bled through the fog of time, the fear so visceral it pressed on my chest, making it hard to breathe. A disturbing event from the past, a mirror reflecting the current nightmare with horrifying clarity. It wasn't just a coincidence. The past and present were entwined in a relentless spiral, a loop that blurred the line between memory and reality. But as relief began to wash over me, a single detail surfaced. A detail so small yet so impossible that it unraveled everything. The timestamp on the footage, which had seemed to confirm the sequence, shifted subtly again. A frame appeared that shouldn't exist, a shadow that moved with deliberate intent, watching from the background, silent but unmistakably there. The watcher. Not just a witness, but a force, a presence that had been observing since the beginning, patiently, threading itself through the cracks in time and memory, waiting for the moment to strike. I realized then that the danger was not something out there in the stars, not some distant, incomprehensible entity. It was here, inside me, inside all of us. It was psychological, atmospheric, deeply personal, a force that feeds on fear, on fragmented recollections and half-remembered truths. It thrives in the gaps between what we think we know and what we're afraid to admit. It is the glitch in the memory, the static in the signal, the silence that screams, and then the twist. The cruelest revelation of all, the footage I'd been studying, the memories I'd dredged from the depths, the patterns I thought I'd cracked. None of it could be trusted. The entire story, every piece of evidence, every whisper, was caught in an endless loop of deception. A reality so fragile that with one glance backward, everything shifted. the narrative folded in on itself, forcing me, forcing you, to rewatch, to reconsider, to doubt everything we thought we saw. 'Cause this isn't just a mystery, it's a trap. And once you step inside, there may be no way out. You're not crazy, but you're not safe either. They were never watching me. They were watching you. That realization didn't come with a flash or thunderclap. No, it slipped in like a chill draft under a locked door, quiet, unwanted, impossible to ignore. It started after the frame glitch, the anomaly that cracked my constructed truth. That's when the messages began appearing in places they shouldn't. The smudged condensation on the bathroom mirror at 3:17 a.m., always the same spiraling symbol, traced over itself again and again, until it looked like something trying to climb its way out. An old photograph on my fridge I'd never seen before, but somehow had scotch tape in the exact place my mother used to seal notes on my childhood lunchbox. I peeled it back with shaking hands and found writing underneath. Not in ink, but scored into the photo paper itself, letters scratched like someone had carved them in desperation. You were right all along. I wasn't alone. That was the second gut punch. There were others, people who never stepped into the frame, who left no footprint in the digital trail, but whose presence you could feel. The sensation of being studied through a cracked doorway, the hair rising on the back of your neck when no one else is in the room. They'd been following this story longer than I had, for decades maybe. Some never spoke at all. Others reached out in ways they thought were subtle, a voicemail with nothing but the sound of a baby crying, but in reverse. A thumb drive left in my mailbox with no return address, containing nothing but a 12-second video of static, until I slowed it frame by frame and saw a face. My own, but younger, and blinking backwards. The symbols began showing up more often, burned into tree bark along my running trail, etched into the underside of my coffee mug. Once it appeared in the condensation on my car's rear window, and when I reached to wipe it away, my hand passed through. No moisture, no fog, just cold, dry glass. That's when I knew the truth wasn't something I was finding. It was something remembering me. They called it the echo. That's what the observer said, at least. He came through on a scrambled ham radio frequency I hadn't touched in years, speaking with a voice that sounded like my father but pitched lower, slower, like it was filtered through grief. I never asked how he knew I'd be listening. I never asked how he knew my name. He told me the dreams weren't dreams, that we were reliving borrowed memories, that the gas giant wasn't just a place. It was a wound in time where reality thinned and sometimes things bled through. He told me the found footage from 20 years ago, the one the government never released, wasn't destroyed. It had been buried, deliberately, not to protect the public from panic, but to protect something else, a pattern, a ritual. He said too much, or maybe he didn't say enough. The signal cut out mid-sentence right after he whispered, "It's not your memory, it's hers." Who she was, I still don't know, but I've seen her, in reflections, mostly, just off-angle, standing too still, smiling with a mouth that didn't move. And in my dreams, where the sky is violet and rains never reach the ground, she walks backward through my childhood home, humming a song I don't know the name of but can never forget. She watches, waits. I think she's one of them. Or maybe she's what they're hiding from. Other people are waking up. I've seen the posts now, buried deep in forums long since abandoned, posted under usernames that seem familiar, like old friends I can't quite remember. "Do you see it too?" one of them asked. "The woman in the static? They don't say much, maybe they're scared. Maybe they know something I don't, yet. But we all share the same symbol, the same spiral, the same unanswered question. That grows louder the more we pretend not to hear it. Who are we, really? If our memories can be altered, if our identities can glitch, if we remember things that never happened and forget things that did. What is a self? What happens when you're just the byproduct of someone else's unfinished thought? I look in the mirror now and wait to see if I blink. I read old letters and try to find handwriting that still feels like mine. But the lines are smudged, the corners burned. Something is changing. I am changing, maybe you are too. There's one more message. I found it today, under the old carpet in my childhood bedroom. A strip of tape, yellowed with age, and underneath it, carved, into the floorboards. You don't remember because you were there. I read it 3 times before I realized it wasn't addressed to me. It was addressed to you, and that's when the lights went out. Everything slowed down after I found the recording, not because of fear, but because some part of me already knew what it would say, not with words, with silence, with the kind of silence that creeps under your skin and settles into your chest like cold water in your lungs. It was a cassette, outdated, unmarked, left on my desk without explanation. I don't even own a cassette player, but when I touched it, my fingers trembled. Not because it was old, but because it wasn't. The plastic was warm. The ribbon inside taut, like it had just been played. Something in me shifted when I held it, like I'd held it before, like I'd left it for myself. It took hours to find a player, days maybe. Time blurred in those final stretches. When I finally heard the voice, I stopped breathing. It was mine, but not now mine. Not fractured, not paranoid. This was me when I still believed the world made sense. Me from before. Laughing in a way I haven't in years. The voice on the tape told a story. A story about watching stars fall into Jupiter's atmosphere, about wondering if pain could exist without a body. The voice asked a question I hadn't dared to form aloud. If your memories were never yours, would you still be you? That was the turning point. Not the gas giant, not the vanishing, not even her. The woman in the reflections, the dreams, the static. No, the real twist was that I had come here looking for a monster, for a conspiracy, for something to fight. But what I found was something no enemy ever offers, forgiveness, and I wasn't ready for it. The confession came next, not in words, but in waves. A memory I had buried so deep it only came back when I stopped trying to force it. I was 10, standing, on the edge of the lake where my sister drowned. No one talks about it, not even my mother, who stopped looking me in the eye after that day. The official story was accident, but the truth was that I saw her go under. And I didn't move. I froze, that's all, not evil, not cruel, just afraid, paralyzed. I've spent my whole life trying to edit that moment out of the reel. I thought I had, but she remembered. That's what this whole thing was. Not aliens. Not ghosts. Not a glitch in the sky or a file you were never supposed to open. It was a question I refused to answer, a grief I refused to carry. And the story has been telling itself, through symbols, dreams, whispers, because I wouldn't. And now it was time. The third perspective, the observer, finally spoke to me face to face, not on a radio, not in some warped signal. He stood in the doorway of my childhood home, older than I remembered, wearing my father's coat. "You've been asking the wrong question," he said. "It was never what happened. It was why you forgot." And suddenly it all collapsed, the flickering images, the voices, the spiral. They weren't hauntings, they were breadcrumbs. Ways back to the part of myself I left behind. I fell to my knees in that room, dusty and still smelling like the summer my sister died. And I let it come. The guilt, the memory, the truth. And for a second, I saw her. Not the reflection. Not the phantom, her on the shore, smiling, forgiving. But here's where it splits, because I still don't know if that was real. I don't know if I saw something or invented something to survive it. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the human mind will write monsters into the margins just to avoid the pain of a single, unbearable fact. That sometimes we are the ones who disappear. Not because something takes us, but because we leave ourselves behind. And when you realize that, really realize it, you're left with a choice: wake up or stay asleep. I'm still not sure which I chose, but I know this: once you hear the story, it never lets you go. Not completely. Not ever. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for stories you were never meant to hear. Until next time. Remember, some truths don't want to be found.